I've always believed one thing. You already have a yes. A no you can get, but a yes is waiting, hidden behind the one thing most people never do. Ask. And not just ask anyone, but the right person. That's where things often stall. We hesitate, overthink, soften our questions, and end up seeking help from people who can't actually help us, all while avoiding the one person who might say yes. But when someone skips the doubt, skips the politics, and goes straight to the source, calmly, directly, clearly, something powerful happens. There was a time in my life when I wasn't just busy. I was performing a full-blown juggling act that would have made any circus proud. Waking up at 6 a.m., showering, dressing, and having breakfast, sometimes all at once. By 7 o'clock, I'd already cleared half my inbox. By 9 a.m., I was deep in back-to-back meetings. From one meeting room to the next, from one whiteboard to the next, bright idea. The day blurred until around 6 p.m. And then, client dinners, late brainstorms, chasing down deadlines like they owed me money. Around 10 p.m., I'd stumble back home. Technically, I had a wife. Occasionally, we'd even speak. If the stars aligned, we might even have dinner together. I wouldn't recommend this lifestyle to anyone, not even my past self. It was a life stacked with overlapping calendars and parallel conversations. Sometimes I had 3 people waiting outside my office at once, each lined up for a different meeting, as if I could download myself into separate dimensions. And my door? Always open. But even then, I could only talk about one crisis at a time. One evening, around 6:30 p.m., I walked out of my office ready to dive into the next round of damage control, when I saw her, the new cleaning lady. She'd started maybe a week ago, 20, maybe 21 years old. And she wasn't standing there by accident. The moment she saw me, she stepped forward and said in a firm and unwavering tone, "Hey Ben, I need to talk to you. Right now." I blinked. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. She had that look, serious, steady, almost like she was about to fire me. I smiled and said, "Well, this must be urgent. Let's hear it." I nearly laughed, genuinely. Not because I didn't respect her, but because in a company where people waited 3 days just to get 5 minutes on my calendar, this brand new cleaning lady had the boldness to cut straight to the front of the line. We sat down. Her problem? There weren't enough cleaning cloths and gloves in the supply closet. She couldn't properly do her job, and she needed me to fix it. At that moment, my brain tried to remind me that we had 15,000 deadlines, 120 employees in Holland alone, dozens of multi-million euro clients like Samsung, Heineken, HTC, and more. And yes, fires to put out, systems to fix, and contracts to close. And yet, I listened. Not because the gloves were more important than the deals, but because this young woman reminded me of something I'd forgotten. She didn't follow the rules. She didn't wait her turn. She didn't play corporate chess. She made what she did matter. She made herself matter. And I respected that. Deeply. Because in a world where most people wait politely, downplay their concerns, and second-guess their right to take up space, she didn't. She cared. About her work, about her standards. And that made her powerful. Not because she had a title, but because she had clarity. And sometimes clarity speaks louder than hierarchy. Because what really happened in that moment wasn't about gloves. It wasn't about cleaning cloths. It was about the courage to ask. She didn't look at my title. She didn't consider my schedule. She didn't wonder if I was too busy, too important, or too far removed. She simply asked for help. And that, right there, is something I wish I saw more often. The willingness to ask the right person the right question. Directly, honestly, without overthinking it to death. She could have asked the other 2 cleaners, the ones who'd been around longer, the ones who knew the protocols, But she didn't. She went straight to the source. Not out of arrogance, but because it made sense. She needed something fixed, and I was the guy with the keys, literally and figuratively. It reminded me of something I once read in a book about Steve Jobs. He said, "I respond to almost every question I get from a stranger, especially strangers, because it takes guts to reach out. Where most people assume I'm unreachable, these people take the shot. They move past their doubts, past their fear of rejection, and they try, simply because they believe I might be the right person to help. And that in itself," he said, "is worth a response." That line always stayed with me, not because it's flattering, but because it's true. We tend to imagine famous people, or people with a title, as distant, unapproachable, guarded by layers of gatekeepers and locked doors. But the truth? Most, even the so-called important ones, are just human beings waiting for someone to ask the right question. Not flatter us, not pitch us, just ask, with sincerity. And yet so many people don't. They hesitate, they overthink, they water down their requests, they tell themselves 1,000 stories about why they shouldn't speak up, why they're not ready, why their problem isn't big enough. But this young woman, she didn't do any of that. She trusted the urgency of her need. She trusted her voice. And maybe most importantly, she trusted me to respond with care. And that kind of trust is a mirror. It makes you want to show up. Not because someone demanded it, but because someone believed you would. It also reminds me of a boy, 15 years old, maybe 16. One afternoon, he just showed up at our office door. No appointment, no introduction. Just a big smile and a question for the receptionist. "Can I speak to the director?" Now keep in mind, this was a time when even some of my closest friends were turned away if they didn't call me directly. The receptionist was usually the fortress. Polite, but firm. Unless your name was on the list, you weren't getting through. But this kid, he had something different. Charm? Maybe. Courage? Definitely. But most of all, a natural lightness. He wasn't pushy. He wasn't trying to sell anything. He was just real, curious, slightly naive in the best possible way. And somehow she let him through. Next thing I knew, he was standing at my desk, hands folded, eyes wide with excitement. He said, "I have this idea. I want to cycle around to local farms with a cargo bike, pick up fresh fruit, vegetables, and sandwiches, and deliver them to companies for lunch." He explained the whole model in about 2 minutes flat. He had the route mapped out, the pitch rehearsed, the passion dialed in. There was just one problem. He didn't have the bike. 5 hours later, there he was, posing proudly next to a brand new cargo bike, beaming like he'd just won the lottery. Now the idea, it never really took off. Maybe the logistics were too tricky, or the timing wasn't right. I never saw him again. But honestly, that didn't matter. Because with that attitude, that mix of boldness and humility, I have no doubt he'll go far. Because here's the thing. He didn't wait to be perfect. He didn't wait until every detail was nailed down. He didn't waste time wondering if he'd be taken seriously. He just showed up with a good heart, a good idea, and a willingness to ask. And more often than not, that's enough.